Introduction. Behind every breakthrough is a simple idea, and Before I Was CEO reveals the ones that matter. We will focus on what it says about company and time. Stay with me, the best part is near the end. Overall summary. People were leaving, and the company was in dire straits. The owners had taken too much money out of the company. This was a turning point, not for the company, but for all three people. In our company, you don't need to get a new title to perform a new role. But he was determined I run the company, and in the end, we struck a deal. In that time, I saw how a company can outright explode, Kustermans told me. For the company, the phase of survival had started. Chapter 1: People and Work. In this first part of the book, we'll meet people whose career is defined by adversity. That's what we'll learn in this first part of the book. But back in 1990, the company they both worked for was in great financial trouble. We'll meet three individuals who led a company that was active during the internet era, and learn how they reacted when that bubble came crashing down. Through these individuals' stories, we'll attempt to answer the following question: how do you deal with adversity? Now, as Orit was working alongside other partners to ensure the survival of the company, the man in front of her was likely to be the next in line to get out, and she couldn't blame him. Orit, I don't want to be the last one left on the sinking ship, the man said. I know everyone is talking to them. A few offices further down the hall, a young consultant was having similar concerns over his future. It was through that experience, she said, that she learned how to lead in times of crisis. I was 17 when I started my service, and was appointed to work for the Deputy Chief of Staff. In hindsight, it may seem as if she got that job because of her father's role in the army, but she assured me that wasn't the case. The role I had was part of the basic training every Israeli performs in the army, she said. But I was younger than most, as I graduated early from high school, and got special permit to join the army at 17. I was selected to work for the Deputy Chief of Staff office. I had been a grade A student. The war room was in a bunker, so we were physically all close to each other, with the chiefs of staff, the people that ran the army in that particular time, all there. People in the war room were making decisions, based on imperfect information. What she took away from that, she said, is how as a leader you should trust your people, how you work under extreme stress, and how you work as a team to come up with the best possible decisions. I always thought I was going to be a professor in Jerusalem, she said. So after earning her degree, she looked for a master's and PhD program, to eventually become a professor. It was the only school I could apply for. They looked for leadership grades instead. Most people in my country said I was crazy, but my father was supportive. At first, I could hardly say hi, hello, or how are you, she said. So I started to go to the supermarket with a friend, where we looked in the aisles to find out about what Americans were eating, and went to a friend's apartment to watch television. Chapter 2: Time and Company. I decided that I wasn't going to be shy about asking things if I didn't understand them. You spent time thinking about options, instead of going straight into the case, he explained. In the end, Gadish said, I spent a lot of time getting to know the language, the culture, and the business. By the time she finished her MBA, in May 1977, she was in the top 5% of her graduating class, and got the prize for Most Outstanding Marketing Student. I wanted to do either of two things, retail or consulting. The reason was a new, up-and-coming consulting firm that had gotten Gadish's attention, Bain & Company, founded 4 years earlier, in 1973. It was a decision she shared with many business school graduates at the time. In that small, fast-growing company there were only 2 offices. The young Israeli consultant was soaked in knowledge all the time. She traveled the country for the first time and appreciated being put even in the oddest of situations. One time, she said, I went to visit pig farmers, maybe about 100 of them. One of her first assignments was in a steel company, a male-dominated industry. After all, I did want to work in the steel industry. So, whether at elementary school or high school, college wasn't a must. I went to a public high school, and maybe 10% went on to college. Besides, other Lansing public high school students at the time found other ways to success. I looked at scholarships in state schools, but didn't get them. In 1986, when Kenny graduated from HBS, he went back to GM and resumed his work in the company. But the excitement of business school had disappeared. And I looked ahead to say, if I work hard, I might run a division, or become the CEO. Unfortunately for Kenny, less than a year later, the company almost went under. First, Bain's one client per industry backfired, as the company bet on expansion by hiring more people and opening more offices. Gadeish, who had been with the firm for 10 years, knew what was coming. What Bain came up with was revolutionary. It was a terrific company that was still true, she said. I joined Bain as a consultant, and 6 months later, the company went through a restructuring, and people got laid off. Chapter 3, Company and Time. I want to stay for at least 2 years. The next time the partner came into her office, Gadeish said, see, not everyone is talking to headhunters. Now do me a favor and say to people that you decided to stay as well. More people came over to her and asked, are you not talking to headhunters? By 1992, the skies started clearing up again, and the financial mist disappeared. As a symbol of the new Bain & Company, Gadeish chose a compass that pointed to the company's true north, its clients. For us at Bain, it was our clients, not our money. The CEOs I spoke to told me time again that this type of career start enables you to learn the basics of being a professional in a well-structured way and gain a toolbox of skill sets that you can apply throughout your career. They can mold young graduates in their corporate culture, so they can either become the next leaders of the company or its biggest supporters. Consider again what he said. I looked ahead and said to myself, if I work hard, I might run a division, or become the CEO of GM. Regarding that, he said, it's the first time in the history that GM is run by a product person. She even had to go out of her way to get to what she wanted, namely, to work for Bain. Neither of them knew whether the company would survive, nor whether they themselves would survive at the company. But even though the view was foggy, as Kenny said, they did soldier on, and in the end came out of the mist, together with their company. In their case, True North was servicing the clients of the company. Next time you quit because you think it's the right thing to do, give yourself a pat on the shoulder. And next time you persevere even though you're going through a rough time, also give yourself a pat on the shoulder. In less than 5 years, shares in the technology stock index Nasdaq grew by more than 500%. The IT outsourcing company was founded by 7 engineers in 1981, and it took them 23 years to make their first $1 billion in revenues. But it took only another 2 years to make the second billion, and only a year for the third billion. The same was true for Digitas, an advertising company that was created in the early 80s, but that had morphed into a digital advertising agency in the mid-90s. On March 14, 2000, it was the last company to go public in the internet era. The IPO made him an instant multimillionaire on paper and valued his company at more than $1 billion. Chapter 4, Company and Years. Gopalakrishnan saw his work of 20 years decimated, and Kustermans was left with no college degree, no money, and a company worth next to nothing. What do you do when, like David Kenny, you're going through a tough time to keep a company afloat? Kenny had stuck it out at Digitas and managed after a few years to sell the company to advertising giant Publicis. When we first met, he was the CEO of the Weather Company, the largest TV and internet company for weather services globally. "It took me 3 years to get my confidence back," he said. He eventually regained his self-confidence, thanks in large part to his math teacher at that time, C. I happened to be at the right place at the right time. Having no savings or family funding, the seven registered their company with only 10,000 rupees in capital, or about $250, and rented a house in Pune from which to run their company. We would lease it out during the daytime, and use it ourselves during the night time to save costs. That made the company profitable from the start as well. I always assumed that time was of critical importance if I wanted to become successful, that I had no time to lose. He skipped almost 10 years in recounting the turning points in his career. I couldn't imagine spending the first 10 to 15 years of my career not thinking about the next step, but he did. Our revenues were $1 million, and we were with about 40 to 50 people working in the company. Around that time, the Infosys co-founders got an offer to be bought out. We told ourselves to aim for an IPO in 3 years, and scale up the business significantly from there. In February 1993, effectively 4 years after its founders had decided to resist a private buyout, the company went public and sold its shares at 95 rupees apiece, which was 75 rupees higher than the book value. Yahoo had only about 100 employees then, but it was already a fast-growing company. "You need to come in and run the company," he said, and for months, I told him I wasn't sure. After about 5 to 7 years, things start to change for many people. Kenny and his wife deemed the time right to make a career move. I figured that after having done Bain for 10 years, I won't learn as much in the future as I did in the last 10 years. The company was valued at $1 billion. Chapter 5, Company and Time. Organizing that first party was about making money and having people look up to us. It wasn't ideal, Kustermans told me when we caught up over the phone 15 years later. After a year, Kustermans decided to give real life a chance and went looking for a job. The uncle of another mutual friend of ours, who was equally attracted by the success stories from the dot-com boom, decided to invest €25,000 in the company. The 3 protagonists of this chapter didn't have a lot of time to enjoy their riches in 2000. It was only after those initial years of struggling that his company went through a decade-long exponential growth phase. Although Gopalakrishnan was not a billionaire anymore, he was still a millionaire, and his company was still in decent shape compared to many of the true dot-com bubble companies. What he did say, and even stressed, was that in the many early years of Infosys, as the founders went through tough times, they were able to ready the company for high growth later on. He said that during the company's first years it was not yet about size, it was about the work we did. During that time, we invested heavily in education, training, and quality systems. If you want to build an institution, it takes time. At the time of this writing, Infosys had doubled its revenues to over $8 billion, and its shares were trading at around $17, 20% shy of their all-time peak in 2000. After working on his Cyganet company for another year without much success, Kustermans and his business partner decided to call it a day in 2003. He sold the company to a competitor and recovered about half of his investors' money. In those years, he learned to sell himself and to persevere. Bookmaker, an online sports betting site, and stayed with the company when it was bought a year later by Unibet, a much larger competitor. This time, Kustermans had joined a company for which the internet wouldn't turn out to be a bubble. Within a year, he was transferred to the London offices of the firm, and received another 5 or 6 promotions in 3 years. It created a special atmosphere, as both the company and all of us working for it were new kids on the block. Electronic Arts, known for Madden NFL and the FIFA series, had acquired the company and wanted to develop it. First, you want to work in an environment where you're inspired, which could be anywhere and in any sector, as long as there are the right people. And on the perseverance and hard work, he said, I know few successful people who don't work hard and persevere. After all the work, there was time for relaxation at last. Closing. That is the heart of Before I Was CEO. If it helped, a quick subscribe keeps more summaries coming. So how do company and time connect? That is exactly where we started. Go back to the top and watch it click into place.